You ain't seen nothing yet, folks, Boris Johnson told the Cabinet today, warning them of the hard work ahead to fulfil the promises that he made at the general election. He also addressed the newly reassembled House of Commons, telling MPs it was a vast improvement on its predecessor. Meanwhile, Jeremy Corbyn said that Labour would hold Mr Johnson to account for his promises and pay tribute to Labour MPs who lost their seats. Well, our political editor, Gary Gibbon, is with me now. Gary.
You were talking in the headlines about what Boris Johnson has done, effectively trying to put sort of handcuffs on the government, saying, I will honour that pledge about coming out of the transition period, the standstill transition that takes you all the way to the end of next year. I will come out at the end of 2020, meaning the negotiations about a future relationship have got to end then. And there's been a reaction from Europe amongst and other places, Britain as well, to that, because a lot of people are saying, at best, you'll get half a deal if you stick to that deadline. You won't be able to get a comprehensive deal. You could get no deal. So effectively you have business and government, which could be under the pressure of a massive reorganisation, having to work out how to deal with deal, no deal and half deal. The other focus, as you're saying, has been on Labour, and right this moment, Jeremy Corbyn has just taken his first question at the PLP meeting of Labour MPs, a hostile environment for him. And there were a lot of sort of filler acts put in ahead of him to try, I think, limit the amount of time that was actually he was exposed to their questions. But the first question came from Yvonne Favard, not exactly one of the hard right of the Labour Party. And she turned around to him and said, you, as an issue, Jeremy Corbyn, came up 5 times as much as anything else. You're toxic. Your manifesto wasn't credible. We were getting doors slammed in our faces in Labour areas. Now, that will not entirely surprise him, because a little earlier he came across Mary Creagh, who was defeated in Wakefield, former Labour MP, and she was in the House of Commons, presumably to pack up her stuff, spotted him having a selfie with a few people. She's about to come on. You might ask her about it. I happened to see the tail end of her encounter with Jeremy Corbyn, and it was extremely frosty. She was giving it with both barrels and saying, you were the problem, you should resign immediately. In that meeting, by the way, one MP has contacted me to say that Jeremy Corbyn did use the words sorry, but they were far from clear who it was directed to and what he was sorry for. This is how the first day went of all the procedures that are involved in cranking up a new parliament.
I swear by Almighty God that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, her heirs and successors, according to law. So help me God.
Yeah. Boris Johnson today got his first glimpse of the House of Commons. He gambled on winning. Outside, the healing he called for wasn't on show. Inside, MPs were being sworn in, and a new speaker was introducing a newly empowered Prime Minister.
Prime Minister! Yeah!
I don't know what you think, but I mean absolutely no disrespect to those who are no longer with us, Mr. Speaker, but I think that this Parliament is a vast improvement on its predecessor. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, I would say it is one of the best parliaments this country has ever produced. This new democratic Parliament, this People's Parliament, is going to do something, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, one of you can guess what it is this Parliament is going to do. What is it going to do? Mr. Speaker, not paying attention. Mr. Speaker, one of you can guess what this Parliament is going to do once we put the withdrawal agreement back. We're going to get Brexit done. Mr. Speaker.
A panto quality to that, but the government was announcing it would put into law the end of 2020 deadline to the standstill transition phase. Effectively, it would compel itself to finish the detailed talks about a new relationship by the end of next year, or leave with no deal.
Are we now looking at another cliff edge at the end of next year because of what Boris Johnson's done today?
What you call it a cliff edge, I'd never be the choice of the EU, never. The reason why we work so strong, with passion and with a lot of dynamism to reach a deal. So we will do everything to avoid a cliff edge.
Is that possible in 11 months, to get a comprehensive trade deal?
We will do the maximum.
The maximum that can be done, he and others argue, is a deal that leaves many sectors out.
If Boris Johnson is to be taken seriously, it's not the potential for a cliff edge, it is a cliff edge. Because, of course, we are prepared. We are prepared, but we know that in 10 months you cannot negotiate anything but bare bones trade agreement.
The trouble is Boris says he wants to diverge on regulation, and he can't have his cake and eat it. He can't have a simple, quick trade agreement and the freedom to diverge. If he wants the freedom to diverge, that's fine, that you can sort that out. It'll take a lot longer because the EU will insist on tariffs to deal with the fact that it's scared about Britain becoming Singapore on terms. It's scared of having a deregulated Asian tiger type economy on its own borders.
It was a seismic election, but we need to repay their trust and work 24 hours a day, work flat out to deliver. And of course, the first 100 days were very busy, 140 days or whatever it was. You may remember it was a very frenetic time. But you ain't seen nothing yet, folks.
Boris Johnson addressing Cabinet today. Labour MPs are still reeling from that seismic event.
Right on, Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
There's only a subdued cheer from loyalists when Jeremy Corbyn spoke in the Commons.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to offer my congratulations to the Prime Minister on winning the election and being returned to office. And I want to pay tribute to those members from my party particularly who sadly lost their seats in the election.
Just before he spoke, Jeremy Corbyn had been given a dressing down by former Labour MP Mary Creagh for his part in her defeat. There was little small talk between the leaders as they walked to the Lords to hear the Queen's message calling Parliament to meet. Some Labour MPs were already disputing Jeremy Corbyn's claim that the defeat was all about Brexit.
There's no question that Jeremy came up on every door, and anyone who says otherwise is not telling the truth. It was definitely a factor.
The message has changed, that we'll come back for key days. The campaign has changed. We're going to have to move forward in a different way.
A cluster of Remainers here today, scaling down and accepting the inevitable after an election that sealed the fate of their cause and opened a new political chapter.
Gary Gibbon there. Well, the Parliamentary Labour Party has been meeting behind me, the first time that Jeremy Corbyn has addressed his now smaller group of MPs since the election. According to the Labour leadership, this is a time of reflection for the party. So how well is that going? With me now is Siobhain McDonagh, the MP for Mitcham and Morden, who was in that meeting, and Mary Creagh, who lost her Wakefield seat last week. Thanks for coming on the programme. Mary, let's start with you first of all. As Gary said, you gave Jeremy Corbyn, the party leader, a dressing down this afternoon in the Commons. What was he doing while you were doing that?
Well, he was chatting to a group of young people, and I said, you know, why are you
taking selfies, apparently.
Yeah, they were all having their photo taken, and this is the man that has effectively enabled a hard Brexit from Boris Johnson. That means that those young people will have less right to live, work, study and travel across the European Union, and that will shrink the size of the UK economy. There's going to be 5 years of austerity, right. And frankly, I wanted to know why he wasn't in... why he was still the Labour...
Are you blaming him for your defeat, first and foremost?
This was Jeremy's manifesto. Jeremy is the leader, Jeremy's NEC, Jeremy's plan, called at Jeremy's time. And I can tell you, on the doorsteps of Wakefield, they had 2 words, and they're not printable. They're not. I can't say them pre-Watershed about what they thought of that strategy.
Did he call you up to say sorry?
I've had no phone calls or messages from anyone in Jeremy or his team, which, given that I was in today, telling my staff that they're going to be redundant a week before Christmas, I think shows that we have in Jeremy a man without honour and without shame, and a type of preening narcissism that means that he thinks he's still got something left to offer the Labour movement and Labour voters who deserted us in their millions.
These are harsh words. Let me, Siobhain, you tweeted to the question, how did it come to this? You said this: simple, elect a leader who dragged UK Labour to the far left, allow Labour to be taken over by a group of public school educated Stalinists who proceeded to lecture voters on their own moral superiority while not dealing with anti-Semitism, and be unpatriotic. Do you still tonight, after that meeting, believe that?
Oh, absolutely. The meeting addressed nothing.
It addressed nothing?
Oh, no. We had a long speech for Ian Lavery, the chair of the party, that said precisely nothing but took some time. We had Jeremy telling us how we won the argument. What argument did we win? Only 35% of households who have an income of less than £20,000 voted Labour last Thursday. And the story that Mary told us about Jeremy not speaking to her extends to most of the MPs who lost their seats last Thursday.
Right.
He doesn't care.
Okay, so what needs to happen now? He wants to hold on till March. None of his team have resigned. I mean, the two people who led to the previous Prime Minister's almost defeat were kicked out the following day.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like him to go absolutely immediately, and I'd like the people around him to go immediately, because I am not convinced that a free and fair leadership election can take place with those people at the helm.
But the Labour Party has changed fundamentally, hasn't it, in terms of its membership? How can he steer back to the centre when the party membership seems to be much further to the left than it was?
Well, I think we've had a devastating experience. People are still reeling, and it gives us much to consider. How can it be that we have been left by vast droves of working class people who simply laughed at our manifesto?
Okay, Mary.
Something. I mean, there are lots of members in my party. I was actually facing a trigger ballot in my constituency. So that was the priority for the leadership of the Labour Party, was to try and trigger MPs that were not loyal enough to the Corbyn project before the election. Jeremy said to me today when I raised this with him, I wanted democracy in the party. Well, he's certainly got democracy, but he's got 60 fewer Labour MPs and 80 more Tory
still really angry.
MPs.
Angry on behalf of people like Mary, who fought all their lives for the Labour Party, angry for the people who are going to be hurt about an unfettered Conservative Party over the next 4 or 5 years.
So should Seamus Milne and all the other advisors around Jeremy Corbyn, should they go now, tonight?
They should go now. If they had any self-respect, they would go
And
right
are you happy
now.
that they're involved with picking the next candidate, the next leader of the Labour Party?
Absolutely
That's
not.
extremely
No.
worrying. And the question is, what is the next phase of the Corbyn project? This has got to be the end, not just of Corbyn, but of Corbynism in the Labour Party.
Got to leave it there. Mary Creagh, Sean, thanks very much indeed. Well, also with me here on the podium is Andy McDonald, the Shadow Transport Secretary, who was also in that meeting. You just heard what your fellow Labour MPs have said. They are incandescent with rage. Has Jeremy Corbyn said the hardest word too late to them?
Well, I understand people's real anger. This is a devastating, terrible result for us.
Do you understand their anger?
I do. I understand their anger very well. We've lost 60 excellent colleagues around the country. In the northeast of England, I've lost colleagues all around me, and that's incredibly painful. Really good MPs, and they're not here with us today. And I feel mortified that's happened, and I accept my share of responsibility, and I'm saying sorry to my colleagues for my part in this terrible, terrible outcome.
On the eve of the vote, there was a video of you singing to your supporters, to voters. It's beginning to feel a lot like Christmas. How ill-judged was that, considering the result?
I really think, in all the circumstances, that's not the.
Were you out of touch with your base, with the voters?
Matt, that was simply an attempt to engage with the people who were waiting and in the cold, having some lightheartedness. If you think, given where we are, I'd readily accept. I'm embarrassed to death at that, because that doesn't look good. But I'm more concerned about where we go from here. And the soul searching that we need to do, and the self-examination we need to go through.
The really big question, this is born out of research that came out today from YouGov and the Onward Foundation. It seems to be that the party of the working class is now the Tory party, not the Labour Party.
Well, I'm not so sure about that. I think we've had this huge issue of Brexit. It's like a meteorite that's hit the political landscape, and I'm very much aware. My colleagues have said how toxic Jeremy was on the doorstep, and I'm personally, knowing the man, I'm upset that he was so vilified and demonised.
But it's bigger than that, isn't it? I mean, according to this research, 70% of men who voted voted for the Tory party, basically were older, didn't have university educations, voted for Brexit. They're from that famous Red Wall. They are now Tory party voters.
Well, we've got to get them back, and we've got to really spend some time understanding that, and leave no stone unturned in terms of our policy offer, how we went about our business, our organisation, and colleagues have been very critical of the campaign itself. And I think we listen to every single word that everybody's got to say, because unless we're prepared to admit fault, we'll never learn the lessons.
But are you now the party of the North London elite, or are you the party of the working class in other parts of the country, like the Midlands or the North?
I think that's nonsense. Just dismiss the 10 million people who voted.
The evidence suggests otherwise.
Well, I would suggest, You know, I came from a Leave seat. I represent a Leave seat. I made my position clearer, but I thought our interests were best served by remaining in the European Union. I did lose. So I lost from 65% of the vote. I went down to 50% of the vote.
Right.
But I did have some limited success on the doorstep when I explained my position. I'm not saying that it worked for everybody. It didn't. It clearly didn't, and I accept that. But it did work in some instances when I explained the damage that could be caused to us as an economy and for our employment.
Andy, thanks very much. Well, let's turn this back to you two. You heard what he just had to say. He said sorry. Jeremy Corbyn has now said sorry. Are we moving on? Peace in our time.
Jeremy said sorry because he's been forced to say sorry. We've heard he's yet to say sorry personally to Mary. He's yet to say sorry to the 59 colleagues we lost. We were told at the PLP meeting that when Theresa May lost the 2017 election, within 24 hours she had spoken to every MP who'd lost.
Can I ask you
Not
one more
for us, though.
If your new leader is called Rebecca Long-Bailey, which many people suggest might happen, is that going to get male voters in the Midlands or the north of England back to the Labour Party?
I think what we have to do is learn the right lessons of this election. Jeremy's holding Christmas drinks tomorrow to celebrate, I don't know what, you know, the biggest defeat in 100 years for the Labour movement. This is a very dangerous moment for the Labour Party. It has no God-given right to exist, and it's not just Corbyn that has to go, it's Corbynism as a project. We need to turn back and win again from the centre-left.
Mary Creagh, Siobhain McDonagh, Andy McDonald, thank you very much indeed to all of you for coming here.